Hello class, it's Professor Streeter. We've reached the final week of classes for the ethics course. You've been doing great work, and I just encourage you to focus on the end game. Make sure you complete the final draft of your essay. You can revise your first essay as well, and prepare for the exam, which is due a week from Wednesday, so May 15th, by midnight on Wednesday, May 15th. In this video, we'll look at the exam. I'll walk you through the questions a little bit, the format, and talk a little bit about some of the announcements that I've posted this week, the remaining tasks for the course. Okay, so here we go. There's a discussion topic this week. I'd just like to hear from you to give some closure on what you've gotten from this course. This is something I really like to read and see from your perspective what this course has been about, what impact it's had on you, what your takeaway is. It helps me prepare for the next semester when I teach it again. So I really enjoy your feedback here and your honest and personal response to what we've been doing this semester. So that's one thing to post before the end of the week. I'll talk about the exam in a moment. It's done. I'm going to share the questions with you in this video. The week 14 assignment, again, I mentioned the discussion. If you have missed any quizzes, then I encourage you to take quiz 7 on the Carruthers essay against the moral standing of animals. If you have already completed all the first 6 quizzes, though, you don't have to take that one. I will drop your lowest score. So it's up to you. It's optional if you've already done the first 6. Same with the homework question, which is, again, giving you an opportunity to reflect on our treatment of animals and what it means to say that animals have moral standing, what kind of responsibilities we have to animals. You can develop a paragraph of writing on that topic for your 6th homework assignment. But again, go back and see if you haven't missed any homeworks up until this point, then you could skip that one because I dropped your lowest score on the homework category. And then lastly, the essay revision. Many of you have submitted drafts and I've given some comments. This is the week to respond to those comments, develop your argument further, make sure you cite your sources properly. Some of you had really interesting arguments that you were making, but I didn't see enough engagement with the texts. So make sure there are references to readings from both the Fundamentals of Ethics and the Ethical Life. That's one of the requirements for the assignment, that you engage with something from both books. Okay, and then finally the exam. So these are all things to turn in this week, the homework and the quiz and the essay revision, so that you can then focus next week just on completing the exam. All right, let me scroll up here to the content page. And I have given you some feedback on your essay drafts and also on some of the homeworks you've been turning in. So you can go back and see how you've done on those assignments. If you have any questions, reach out. We can talk on Google Meet. Talk about anything. We have a little more than a week left before the semester ends, but I'm happy to meet with you and talk about your grade or any of the assignments that you're working on or that you've missed, if you're concerned about any of those things. Okay. Here's the final exam document that I've already shared with you, giving you the basic format for what you're going to be writing about. Just like the midterm, there's 8 questions that you'll answer, but I've got it divided into 3 different sections. So you have to choose a couple questions from the first section, a couple questions from the second section, and then 4 questions from the third section of the exam. All of the questions you should already have been looking at. They're in the discussion question section at the end of each chapter in both of your books. And I've shared with you, these are the chapters to focus on. So by this point, I hope you've made some decisions. Like if you feel more comfortable writing about consequentialism, then there'll be enough questions from chapter 9 and 10, and that could be section A for you. If you're more interested in thinking about Kantian ethics, then there'll be questions to choose from on chapters 11 and 12. Or you could write about both for that first section. Same with section B, right? There's chapters on the social contract tradition, virtue ethics, and feminist ethics. You don't have to write about all of them, right? By now, you should have focused in on the chapters that you feel most confident about, that you have something to say about. And then finally, for section C, you're choosing 4 questions, but at most you could prepare for 4 of these 6 readings. So choose the 4 essays here again that you feel most confident about. What I'm looking to see in the exam is that you can break down an argument, identify some key concepts, and explain that in your own words. And each question from the back of the book, right, points you to specific moments in the argument or in the chapter. Okay, so let me then look at the exam itself. If you go here to this folder, if you scroll down, this again is the explaining the format. If you scroll down, now we've got the document that you can open, and that contains all the questions. It looks like this. Okay, so when you open it up, it's a Google Doc, and or sorry, it's a Word document, and there are 3 parts to the exam. I've just explained that. And make sure to read the instructions carefully. Last point before we move to the questions, I want to see that you're engaging with the text, so in each paragraph that you write, you'll be writing 8 paragraphs. In each paragraph, make sure you give a direct or indirect quote with page references to support your interpretation. Okay, that's important here. Okay, so let's scroll down here. Part A. There are, I think, 8 questions. Yes, 8 questions in Part A, all from chapters 9 through 12. So chapter 9 and 10 are on consequentialism, and chapter 11 and 12 are on Kantian ethics. Okay, so these are questions, again, that give the page numbers and the chapter. So in chapter 9, how does act utilitarianism differ from ethical egoism? We've talked a little bit about both views. How are they different? Which is a more plausible theory, and why? The why part is really key. I want to see from your perspective, if you choose this question, what makes act utilitarianism a more plausible ethical theory than ethical egoism? So you'd have to explain what both are, how they're different, and why you think one is more plausible than the other. Okay, in a complete paragraph with a textual reference to support what you say. On the same page at the end of chapter 9, a question about the idea of the standard of an action from a moral point of view here, according to the utilitarian, is the action optimific? So what does it mean to say that an action is optimific? Now, it's possible, right, that an action could bring about more happiness than any other alternative, but still fail to be optimific, right? So how is that possible? This is a way of gauging how well you understand the concept of optimific. Right? The idea from the utilitarian perspective is that we should choose the action that is optimific. But right, it seems like in some cases an action might bring about more happiness than any other, but still not be optimific. Okay, still not be the one that, from a utilitarian perspective, we should choose. Okay, so that's, again, if you go back to chapter 9, you could think about how to answer that question based on what you've read in Schaefer-Landau. Okay, so each question is pointing you, these page numbers are, this is where the question appears at the end of the chapter. But in order to answer the question, go back and read chapter 9 and find the passage that you think helps explain this point, and explain your answer in your own words, okay, with a quotation or an indirect quote to support. Okay, here, moving to chapter 10, problems with utilitarianism. The utilitarian requires us to be impartial. Okay, what does that mean? What does it mean to be impartial in your moral approach, in your approach to moral questions? And why does, or in what sense does utilitarianism require that we treat all people equally? Is this a positive or a negative feature of the theory? Okay, so impartiality, what does it mean, right? What does it mean to say that the utilitarian requires that we be impartial, and is this a good thing or a bad thing? Okay, and explain why. Okay, I'm not going to go through every question here, just trying to give you a sense. We talked a lot about injustice and the problem of injustice for the utilitarian. Okay, so I've given you that question here. And then moving to Kant, what's a maxim? What does it mean to say that a maxim is universalizable? That's a key component of Kantian ethics. Schaefer-Landau thinks that the principle of universalizability fails to be a good test. It's not enough. There are some cases where I can act on a universalizable maxim, but still it looks like I haven't done the right thing, right? So that suggests that it's not a sufficient test of morality. So explain, like there's examples that Schaefer-Landau gives. You could explain that in your own words. Integrity, according to Schaefer-Landau's interpretation of Kant, is the kind of key moral virtue. What does Kant mean by integrity, and is it always a virtue? That's a question for you to think through. Why or why not? Right? Is it always good to act with integrity? Or is integrity always the kind of the fundamental thing to preserve in your actions? Okay, so that's a way of assessing Kantian ethics. Chapter 12 raises problems with Kantianism. What's the relationship between Kant's principle of universalizability and humanity? Right? Sometimes they seem to give conflicting advice. Is that a problem for Kant? If so, which do you think is a better guide? Right? Should we side more with the principle of universalizability or the principle of humanity if they give conflicting advice? Okay, so I got to move on. That's part A. Part B, I've given you some questions that look at the social contract theory from chapter 13 and chapter 14. Okay, so for example, a question about the prisoner's dilemma. And then a question from chapter 17 on virtue ethics, and a question from chapter 18 on feminist ethics. Okay, so again, you're choosing 2 from part A. So there's 8 questions here in part A. You only have to do 2 of them. With part B, there's 6 questions, and you again have to choose 2. So either think about the attractions of social contract theory or some of the problems with it, or a question about virtue theory, and there's 1 question about feminist ethics. Okay. Finally, part C, you're looking to choose 4 questions here, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to choose from. These are all questions from the ethical life. So I've given the chapter number and the page reference. So a question about O'Neill's essay on the Kantian approach to famine, a question from Humer's essay on whether on the right to immigrate, right? Whether immigrants have a right to immigrate, whether it makes sense to impose any restrictions on immigration. Okay, that was what we read for this week. So you could write a paragraph about Humer's criticism of the argument for imposing restrictions on immigration. The Carruthers essay, chapter 28, on the moral standing of animals, right? Your homework for this week and the quiz was on that essay, so you could write about it for the exam too. There's 2 questions here on the Carruthers piece. A couple questions on Thompson on abortion, and then 2 questions on the Hausman piece on affirmative action or preferential hiring. And then finally, 1 question on Anderson's essay on integration as a moral imperative. Okay, so again, all these questions are included in the book, so you've already looked at them. These are the ones that I've decided to include on the exam. And you have a lot of choices to make here, right? So there's 23 questions. You only have to choose 8. I am happy to meet with you individually if you have questions about this exam, but now you have about a week to complete it. And please reach out to me if you have any concerns or any confusions about the exam. Okay, that's all for now. I will make another video before the end of the semester. And look to the emails for any updates about the exam or about the comments that I'm sharing on your essays. You could also just open the file of your essay directly and look at my comments there. Okay? All right. I believe in you. Stay focused. We're almost done. You've been doing great work. Okay. Take care. Bye.